Hi, my name is Phil. I like to talk about politics. In this video, I'd like to discuss the first round of votes that the House of Lords has been conducting on Boris Johnson's Brexit withdrawal bill and the amendments that they are seeking to make. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and political commentary, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So this week, the House of Lords are debating the European Union withdrawal bill and voting on amendments that they would like to see. It may well be that there are several changes to the bill that the Lords will make, but yesterday they definitely put in an extremely important one. It also means that Boris Johnson has now faced his first defeat since the general election. It's nothing to get excited about. It's nothing like being defeated in the House of Commons, which is a much more serious threat to a Prime Minister's authority. And it's also on an incredibly petty issue for him to be arguing against in the first place. So the amendments would, if passed through, enshrine in law the right for EU nationals who have the legal right to stay in the UK, physical proof of this. To actually say, here's your physical proof that you are allowed to remain in the UK. And it sounds so innocuous that you wonder a couple of things. You wonder why the government would object to this, but also why it wouldn't be standard practice in the first place. And it's also important because having the right to remain in the country, but only having the proof in digital form, has caused a lot of problems for many and is likely to be an increasingly difficult issue as 2020 rumbles on into 2021. And a government spokesman immediately disagreed with the Lord's decision and said that their policy would not change. Now, again, you have to ask yourself why the government would be so opposed to issuing a physical card. You know, they're already issuing the acceptance to stay, the settled status. They're saying, yes, this is fine. Why not physical proof of that? So Brandon Lewis, who's a Home Office minister, said that the government system meant having, and I quote, a digital status which can't be lost or tampered with, or lost, stolen or tampered with rather, sorry. The problem is it also can't be produced when needed for, say, an employer or a landlord or any number of other officials who will ask to see physical proof. Digital proof is no good for them. And the government will know this as well. You know, as such, this could be a way of claiming, the government claiming, oh, we're providing settled status, but encouraging others to discriminate, albeit unwittingly, on behalf of the government. You know, the government gets to say, oh, we've granted settled status to 2.5 million people. But if those people don't have proof in a form that's demanded of them, of those who need to see that proof, what good is it? There is no legitimate reason to block the issuing of a physical card at all, which of course could run alongside the digital certificate. You know, and it's all right the government saying, oh, well, you know, it can't be tampered with or anything like that. It's quite easy for those who are willing to look up the digital proof, they can check with the card anyway. Just they've got the card, check online to make sure it's what it says it is. Otherwise, the card is necessary because there are some who do not check and will not check the online certificate. So, you know, one aspect of Boris Johnson's plans has now been defeated by the House of Lords. I hasten to add that it's not on a point that formed part of the Conservatives' manifesto promises. You know, this isn't a case of, oh, the unelected House of Lords are seeking to block, you know, what Boris Johnson has a mandate for. It's not. You know, Boris Johnson getting a majority in Parliament is not a mandate to do whatever he likes. It's difficult to even argue it's a mandate for anything when a minority of people voted for him. But okay, if you want to go along with the parliamentary mandate, he has a mandate to follow through on his manifesto promises. This does not target a manifesto promise, and I will guarantee that none of the amendments that go through this week will in any way invalidate any of his election promises. So Boris Johnson doesn't get to say that the Lords are seeking to block his mandate from the people, as I say, even though it was a minority of people who support it anyway. So what happens now? Well, once the withdrawal bill has been finished within the Lords, which will happen this week, I imagine it has to, or to run out of time. So it'll then go back to the House of Commons with its various amendments. There's going to be at least one amendment so far. Now, at this point, the government has two choices. it can accept the amendments. It can go, you know, all right, we see your point, fine. MPs have one final vote on it and then it goes off to be signed into law by the Queen. And that's it. And if Boris Johnson wants to amend it at some point in the future, he's free to do so. Parliaments are always free to amend, repeal, you know, enact laws as they see fit. Or two, the government can object to the amendments and, you know, they can change it back to what they want and then send it back to the House of Lords and go, no, this is what we want. Now, what could then happen is a standoff. That would be highly unusual because, you know, the Lords do not seek to frustrate bills from the Commons. Basically, the House of Lords effectively look at a bill and look at it in more detail than the Commons tend to and say, look, you know, we can see what you're trying to do, but it's going to have these unfortunate consequences. We think you should rethink it. And they put an amendment in to go, this will do what you want it to do in a way that's not going to have those unfortunate consequences. At which point, very often, Parliament, or the House of Commons part of Parliament, goes, yeah, fair enough. Or if they're not really sure about it, what usually happens is government ministers will negotiate with influential peers, come up with a compromise that will be mutually satisfactory. That's the normal way of doing it. That is the usual way of doing it. But Boris Johnson is highly unusual, and he may not seek compromises. But it's an absolute mad one to stick his feet in on, because the amendments made so far, and the amendments made in this week, even without me knowing what all of them will be, will absolutely not be ones that will stop him following through on his Brexit promises. They won't put in any amendments that will cut the rug from under him, because that's not what they do. Even when the Lords know that a piece of legislation is fundamentally bad and bad for the country, they don't block it. They're just making sure that the things that have nothing to do with election promises that will have unfortunate effects don't end up in there. But let's say Boris Johnson refuses to compromise, which he might, and the Lords refuse to back down. I don't know whether they would or they would not. Then that means, in that situation, the withdrawal bill will not be there. It won't be in law in time for January the 31st. I mean, time is tight as it is. Tight as it is. The Parliament Act can be used by the House of Commons to force through legislation without interference from the Lords, because you may ask yourself, the House of Commons is democratically elected, the House of Lords generally isn't. So surely you can't have the undemocratically elected Lords blocking anything they like. No, the House of Commons can say, no, we want it in this form, so much so that we will use the Parliament Act to force it through the Lords. But there are conditions attached to that which make it impossible to do anytime soon, certainly not this month. So if I were Boris Johnson, quite frankly, I'd be doing a couple of things. First of all, I'd be looking at this amendment and going, this doesn't hurt me politically. It's a nothing. It's nothing. It shouldn't be something to argue over. But I'd also be talking to influential peers about the sort of amendments I'd be open to. And like I say, yesterday's was no big deal for him. It's absolutely madness that they're arguing against it. Incredibly petty thing to argue about. But he should talk to them, compromise, agree the sort of amendments that he's willing to let through. And the bill will be ready in time for January the 31st. And that's all there is to it. Frankly, it makes no sense for him to do otherwise. But we will see. We will see this week and then early next week. So I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, then please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.